A country road, take me home to the place I belong.
Watch, learn, watch, learn, watch.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the main event. Let's argue. So without any further ado, let's do it! TikTok is actively making music worse by homogenizing it, saying that essentially everyone in a certain genre sounds the same. It's getting really boring. I mean, I hear what you're hearing too sometimes. I don't know if I could strictly attribute it to TikTok though. Look, first off, no era of popular music has been without its copycats and its trends, its artistic ambulance chasers who hear or see a certain wave of a sound that audiences are taking to or that artists are creating and then just like, kind of hops on top of it, copies it. That has happened decade after decade after decade after decade. And yeah, it's happening in the TikTok era too. Is there more copycatting? Is there more trend chasing today than there was in the 80s or even 10 years ago? I'm really not sure if I could even quantify that. I mean, I could say there was a lot of trash new wave and dance pop in the 80s that just kind of paled in comparison to a lot of the best stuff the genre had to offer at the time. There was a lot of really awful disco, frankly, in the 70s that, again, was just like generic, watered down shit in comparison to the stuff in that genre that has withstood the test of time. And there was just a proliferation of it because of how popular it was. There's a lot of bad post-grunge that we would not have today if not for the fact that, Nirvana and Pearl Jam popped off in the way that they did commercially. The past only looks as diverse as it does because we just remember the best of the best of the best moments from that time period. Right now, in the present, we're basically subjected to everything that the world of music has to offer, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the redundant, especially the redundant. And if there's anything making that seem worse or more intense right now, it's that basically anybody can record and upload a song onto the internet. And look, the vast majority of people, when it comes to any kind of artistic discipline, especially if they're young, especially if they're inexperienced, they're going to be creating something based on the influences of their favorite artists, or a sound, or a trend, or a something that they think they could employ in order to get people paying attention to what they do. Some of you guys in your teen years are hearing more different bands and albums and artists than some boomers have heard in their entire lifetime, which is a lot, and is also a pretty big paradigm shift. Melon always puts the best track in the least favorite track section. No, I don't! My least favorite track picks are valid, okay? They're valid! Leave me alone! Leave me alone! I don't need to hear a band to know they're awful. Names, album covers, and song titles pretty much give you an idea of what you're in for. Most music is generic enough that this applies across the board, even super brutal death metal or J-pop. I don't entirely agree with what you're saying here. I mean, what's the old adage? Don't judge a book by its cover! I mean, there is some truth to that. There's a reason that phrase has stuck around. But with that being said, there are certain aesthetics and art choices that a lot of artists employ to kind of communicate to the audience very clearly. This is the kind of music you're going to hear! There's a certain reason a lot of rap albums look the way that they do on the front cover. There's a reason a lot of black metal albums look the way they do on the cover, because they know and understand there is a built-in audience for this kind of thing, and they're looking to attract that audience. It's like an ad, which is unfortunately what a lot of album art has been reduced to these days. A first impression to give to a potential listener to entice them into trying the record out, as opposed to an extension of the music or a genuine and uncorrupted expression of artistic value. I mean, you're right in that sometimes it's easy to tell what genre a record is in, given how it looks, and whether or not you enjoy that genre can inform whether or not that album is for you. I don't know, man. Beyond that, it's kind of hard to tell because, frankly, over the years, and maybe Ryan wants to throw some examples in here, there's a lot of great and classic albums with, frankly, shitty art. Obviously, bad albums with bad art, too, but I don't really know what the ratio is on either one. Analog is better than digital. Tape versus Pro Tools. This is such an old argument. It's such a stale argument. I mean, look, here's the thing. When it comes to clarity and and distortion and a host of other things. Aesthetically, are there things that are preferential when it comes to tape and analog? Sure, but it's not like without careful planning and experimentation that some of those same aesthetics couldn't still be captured within the digital world. It happens every day. There are numerous artists and records who have seen success doing exactly that. So it's not like once you transfer over into the digital world, you're robbed of any and all vibes that could possibly exist in the tape and analog world. That's number one. Number two, even if there is great aesthetic and sonic potential on sticking to tape and analog over digital, it's just so goddamn inconvenient and also expensive too. Like, if we existed in a world that only recorded on tape and insisted that everything be created in that way, that would create an insane level of barrier to entry for a lot of smaller and independent artists, and I don't think I'd want to live in that world. Even if the digital era that we're in has its flaws and its shortcomings and its problems, the freedom to create and the openness that that creates for people who just wouldn't have gotten exposure otherwise, I think that's more valuable. The societal benefits that creates have more of a utilitarian effect than the purity of sound you get off tape. People that call cobblers pies ought to be slapped. Is there enough violence around the holidays? Isn't there enough? Aren't we already at a point where there's enough violence in the world? Can't we just handle this situation with like a PowerPoint? Do a history of pie versus the history of cobbler and just make a teachable moment? Why do the knives gotta come out? And if the knives do have to come out, it should just be to cut the pie or the cobbler. Calling prog pretentious is not rock criticism. Think of an original complaint. I mean, I'm not against personally calling prog or any other genre pretentious, even if it is an obvious criticism, if I feel like that label fits appropriately on the music. I just think at the end of the day, like, we need to be careful about when and how we use these terms and not to overuse them. Like, if a piece of music is not your cup of tea and it's too deep and it's too strange and it's too abstract and it's too out there to the point where you don't like it, that does not necessarily mean it is pretentious. Keep in mind this term means there is some kind of inference of importance that isn't actually there. Like, if some piece of art or music is trying to come across as impressive or profound and so on and so forth, but it's actually kind of middlebrow or it's unimpressive, it's, I don't know, basic or lacking in some kind of serious way, that is pretentious. Some people unfortunately use the term every single time they hear something that is the least bit strange or experimental, which there is actually a lot of experimental music and strange music out there that is important, that is groundbreaking, that is amazing, that is mind-bending, that is profound, that is mind-expanding, and is able to be those things without coming across as self-important. Again, I'm not against the term. It's a fine term. If it comes across as unoriginal, it's just because people overuse it and use it in context where it doesn't fucking make sense. And sure, maybe to a degree, what is deep and what is profound is in the eye of the beholder. But as a critic and somebody who's supposed to be aware of the greater world of music, you should know, you should be generally aware as to whether or not what you're listening to is original, is novel, is groundbreaking, is envelope pushing, is breaking new ground in some kind of way, or doing something that is genuinely strange or out there. And keep in mind, being all those things doesn't necessarily mean a piece of art is great. This is a very long discussion. It could go on forever. I'm just going to cut it off here. All right, that's going to be it. Thank you for watching. It's been a great Let's Argue experience with you. Once again, mwah, 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 mwah. I'll see you in the next one. Over here next to my head, another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, pie, cobbler, argue, forever.